Proverbs chapter 3 and verse 13 tells us how blessed is the man who finds wisdom and the man who gains understanding. And so we began talking about that yesterday, and we looked at verse 14 and verse 15 yesterday. But then when you look at verse 16, it continues on with that promise of the blessing of God coming upon the one who has that wisdom and the one who gains that understanding. It goes on there and says in verse 16, he says, long life is in her right hand, and in her left hand are riches and honor. So in her right hand is long life, and in her left hand are riches and honor. And goes on in verse 17, it says, her ways are pleasant ways, and all her paths are peace. Her ways are pleasant ways, and all of her paths are peace. So when you look at those pleasant ways and you begin to understand the pleasant ways, there's a lot of ways in this world that aren't pleasant ways. They're hard ways. They're tough ways. They're treacherous ways. They're ways that will just beat you down and destroy you. But the ways of wisdom and the ways of understanding, the ways of God's wisdom and the ways of God's understanding are pleasant ways. Pleasant ways, joyful ways. They're going to bring joy to your life. They're going to bring happiness. They're going to bring satisfaction. And that's what it means to have pleasant ways within your life. It's going to be a pleasure to your life. You're going to enjoy it. Yesterday we talked about investing in wisdom and understanding rather than silver or gold. And there's folks in this world that are just loaded down with all of the silver and the gold and the riches this world has to offer. They're driving the finest of cars. They're living in the finest of houses. They're wearing the finest of clothes. Their bank accounts are overflowing. Money is not a problem. They could buy anything in this world that they want, but they're miserable people. They're miserable. Why are they miserable? Because they're trusting on all of those things rather than trusting in God. We trust in God and we find His wisdom and we begin to understand that's pleasure. That's joy. And not only does it bring pleasure into our life, the Bible goes on to say in verse 17, her ways are pleasant, pleasurable, joyful, and all of her paths are peace. All of the paths are peace. People killing themselves to make $1, and people, working themselves to the bone night and day to try to get wealthy, and, all of these schemes and all of these plans that they have. And, so many times they just backfire on them with all these get-rich-quick schemes, and they're trying to do all of these things, and it's just weighing them down, and oftentimes it destroys them. But these paths, the paths of God's wisdom, the paths of God's knowledge, these paths are paths of peace. Now remember what God said in the same chapter in verse 6. It says, in all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight. So through His wisdom and through His understanding and acknowledging God, putting your faith and trust in God, He's going to make your path straight. He's also going to bring peace to those paths. The world may be absolutely and utterly chaotic all around you. But you know you're following God. And He has it all worked out. And that brings peace to your